I raise up my voice, not so that I can shout, but so that those without a voice can be heard. And a woman with a voice, by definition, is a strong woman. With these vibrant words of Malala Yousafzai, I welcome you all on behalf of the Department of English, Bishop Heber College, to the National Virtual Seminar on Encumbrance to Emancipation, the Alchemy of Women's Writing in India. True prayer is neither a mere mental exercise nor a vocal performance. It is far deeper than that. It is a spiritual transaction with the creator of heaven and earth. I now invite Dr. Shanti, Associate Dean of Arts and Assistant Professor of English, to lead us in prayer.
Reading from the scripture, the book of Psalms 145, 1-6. I will exalt you, my God, the King. I will praise your name forever and ever. Every day, I will praise you and extol your name forever and ever. Great is the Lord and most worthy of praise. His greatness no one can fathom. One generation commends your work to another, and they tell of your mighty acts. They speak of the glorious splendor of your majesty, and I will meditate on your wonderful works. They tell of the power of your awesome works, and I will proclaim your great deeds. Here ends the reading. Prayer. Our Heavenly Father, God of this universe and God of grace, we open our hearts, minds, and souls to worship you. Thank you for the gift of today and for your grace that we live in your presence. Thank you for helping us to come together in this conference. Lord, come, be with us, inspire us, and lead us in our time together in this intellectual exercise. Bless our institution, our resource persons, and all delegates and students who attend this conference. Bless our nation and bless every one of our activities. As each moment passes by, keep us under your watchful eye and provide us your guidance and wisdom. Help us, Lord, to be faithful to you. We ask all these things in the beautiful name of our Lord and Savior Jesus. Amen.
Thank you, ma'am.
Dear participants, we would like to share the Hiba experience musically through a college song composed by late Professor H.D. Prabhakaran and set to tune by Professor Joha Devasathan.
Praise be to God beyond all age. Praise be to Bishop Heber College, a spring of light, a knowledge mine, the gems of Heber bathing shine with pride and love
Kindly be seated. Small cheer and great welcome makes a merry feast, says Shakespeare. I now invite Dr. S. Shobana, Dean of Arts and Head Department of English, to welcome the august gathering.
Hearty welcome and good morning, one and all gathered here and who have joined us online, especially the enthused participants and paper presenters. The investigation into the power and complexity of human mind looks an expedition without destination. New ethos spring up new challenges, which result in surprising and astonishing twists and turns in the way man's thinking intersects with that of women. Maybe we are searching among the branches, the beautiful branches which bear the fruits, and the beautiful flowers to watch and enjoy, for what appears only in the roots, solutions to the contradictions of life. We are searching all the time in the wrong places. A tree's beauty is there in its branches, but its strength lies in its roots. Literature, the sibling of psychology and philosophy, the domain of probabilities, help us to delve deep into the roots of human thinking. This day is a dream come true day for all of us. The organizing committee, each one of the staff of the department, the young students of the department, the eager participants who are waiting online, the paper presenters, our principal, and the rest of the college too. It's because we have with us a very important person, Madam Geeta Hariharan. Madam, we welcome you heartily. Warm greetings on behalf of our principal, vice principals, deans, associate deans, and there's so many heads of the so many departments. There are about 28 departments in the college. All of them join with me in extending to you a warm welcome and good morning to you.
Thank you.
All of them showed interest in listening to you today. So many of them from various departments will be joining too. And so we were just waiting for this day. We've been planning for over 2 months for this particular day, and the day has come. So we have with us Madam Geeta Hariharan, who is widely known to us as the author of The 1,000 Faces of Night, a widely read novel, for which she bagged the covetous Commonwealth Writers' Prize, the first of her writing. She is also a renowned essayist and an editor. And interesting for me, she's also edited stories for children and written stories for children. And one edition, Sorry, Best Friend, is also on her list. We all await your wisdom, ma'am, on how exactly the intersection happens between the man's mind and the woman's mind in the context of nations, any particular nation for that matter. In this case, it's the Indian context, a nation's development. So on behalf of the entire department of the college, we express our gratitude for having given your time to join with us to give your wisdom. Thank you very much, ma'am. Hearty welcome to the other speakers. Both of them are the alumni of our department. Dr. Sumati, a well-wisher and a friend to all of us, a great counselor as far as academics is concerned, and a prudent evaluator of academics, and an eager partaker of all our academic affairs. We welcome you, ma'am, Dr. Sumati. She has joined us online. Welcome to you, ma'am. She is also the Associate Professor of English and Head of the Department of English, Government Arts College, Coimbatore. And she chooses to speak on the works of Mahashweta Devi. We have with us Dr. Shanti Chitra, a well-known person among us who've been here for over 10 years. She worked here, she studied here. We're happy to welcome you, Shanti Chitra, to the forum. She has also shot into fame recently for her novels, The Fractals, and secondly, Lonely Marriages. And she has blossomed into a writer, a novelist, and she is also heading the Department of English, SRM College, Kattangulathur, Chennai. Most welcome amidst Shanti Chitra, and she is going to share her thoughts on women's writing too. Deep thanks and warm greetings to Dr. Lizzie Williams, Associate Professor of English, Department, St. Xavier's College, Palayam Gotai. Dr. Vinayaga Selvi, Associate Professor of English, Bharatidasan University, Tiruchirappalli. And Dr. Sandra Quentel, Associate Professor of English, Holy Cross College, who are with us today to give their expertise in their academics, pruning, assessing, evaluating the papers, and giving their expertise as far as the papers, when they will be presented, is concerned. Today, they will share the sessions and they will share their expertise with that group of paper presenters, which is in a big way a contribution to the evolution of whatever we would discuss today, the thought or the thought process, the whole process that's going to go on for the whole day. And we welcome amidst us with great warmth and especially gratitude, the three of them, Dr. Lizzie Williams, Dr. Vinayaga Selvi, and Dr. Sandra Quentel. And thank you for the time, and thank you to be with us and to share your expertise. Deep thanks and warm welcome to Principal Sir, Dr. Paul Diabran. Thank you very much, sir, for gracing the occasion. And I know him for over 20 years as a person who has a passion for English. Generally thinking in English and expressing in English. And so his visit to the department in any way, be it a national seminar or just a meeting with the staff, always has a very special implication for me personally, and that almost all of the staff of the department would have sensed already. And so your presence and your words of wisdom today, sir, definitely are going to take us a long way in helping us to motivate ourselves to do even better in the field of literature, language, and anything concerned to that. And thank you so much, sir, for choosing to be with us amidst your very busy schedule. I, at this juncture, thank profusely the participants, an enthused list of young participants. They are research scholars and they are also teachers who sent in their papers, full papers, The number runs to over 100. We as a department and organizing committee, on behalf of the staff of the department, who have all put in their efforts, their heart and soul into organizing this kind of a national seminar, we express a profuse thanks to you because you chose to send in your papers amidst your very tight work, especially teaching online. And thank you so much, the presenters. And thank you so much, the organizing committee. Have been working at the organizing of this day's affair for over a month now. Thank you especially the head of the team, the captain of the ship, Dr. Parvati, the organizing secretary. She deserves profuse thanks from me personally. It's because she has looked into the arrangements very meticulously. And thank you so much, Dr. Parvati. And last but not the least, the staff of the department and young students of the department who have joined online and who are here to attend this inauguration and the speeches to follow. My deep thanks for taking part in this day's academic affair. And thank you, one and all. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, ma'am, for the amiable welcome.
A great leader has the capacity to translate vision into reality. We are very fortunate to have such a leader as our principal, Dr. D. Paul Dayaparan. We now invite our beloved principal to deliver the presidential address.
Thank you. Esteemed chief guest of today's national virtual seminar, respected Madam Geeta Hariharan, the renowned writer of our nation, esteemed speakers of today's national workshop, Dr. Mrs. Sumati, Dr. Shanti Chitra, and other plenary speakers, beloved head of the Department of English and Dean of Arts, Dr. Mrs. Shobana, beloved UG head and Dean for Research and Development, Dr. Suresh Frederick, dear head in charge of self-finance stream of English and Dean for Training and Placement, Dr. Dhanapal, my dear colleagues of English Department, beloved Organizing Secretary, Dr. Mrs. Parvati, dear participants of this useful national virtual seminar on Encumbrance to Emancipation. My warm greetings to all of you. It's a great joy and privilege for me to associate myself with all of you while the Department of English, after planning meticulously for a month, today they have gathered here to conduct a national virtual seminar inviting illustrious resource persons on online to meet all, to discuss, to participate usefully on the theme Encumbrance to Emancipation. Just this morning, I was wondering what to speak in the presidential address of the inaugural function. Encumbrance, it means maybe a kind of hurdle, kind of restriction. Movement is a bit difficult. We can't move around. The contribution that we are going to make for the family, for the institution, for the people whom we contact, for the nation will be prevented. So from this, how can we relieve ourselves to contribute? So emancipation is maybe free from restraint, free from constraints, free from hurdles. Dear friends, in the life, we always face a lot of hurdles, lot of trials. Even every day, we have to tackle our problems. We have to free from those, and we have to make ourselves in a conducive atmosphere so that we can contribute to the nation. Normally, while I was preparing, while I was thinking, in our college, just to charge our student friends, we organize 2 retreats. The first one in the odd semester, the second one in the even semester. What is the title? What is the theme of the first semester retreat? It is called Fetters Free. In the even semester, we have a retreat on the theme Rejoice. Unless we free from all the hurdles. What is fetter? A chain, a chain that is tied on our ankles, or the chain that tied on our wrists. So if we have that kind of situation, we can't do anything with our hands. We can't do anything with our legs. We can't move. Is it okay? Unless we free from that kind of tight situation, we cannot contribute much. And in second semester, we have Rejoice. Unless the fetters are free, how can we lead a joyful life? It is not possible. Is it okay? Normally, in higher education, what we do, we make our student friends comfortable, isn't it? As we impart literature, different kinds of literature, as we impart knowledge to the student friends, we say knowledge is power, knowledge is supreme power. While we impart all those, we have to make students comfortable in life, isn't it? We annihilate all the problems, all the hurdles. Then only, unless we provide a conducive teaching, learning atmosphere, how is it possible for us to impart everything what all we have known? It's of no use. Is it okay? Unless the atmosphere, the scenario, the place where they sit is conducive enough to listen to our lectures, that is not possible. Is it okay? So therefore, every day in our life, from the kid till we go to heaven, we are in a position to free ourselves from one difficulty or the other difficulty. That is the destination. I'm glad that Geeta Madam is going to speak on when women narrate the nation. Is it okay? When women narrate, everything will be perfect, isn't it? We always say mother tongue. Okay. A nation is compared to women, isn't it? Not man. Though we call Gandhiji Mahatma as the father of the nation, isn't it? Is it okay? Nation is addressed only as a respectable lady. Is it okay? Mother tongue, mother country. Is it okay? So parent, we say parents. Parent always refers mother, isn't it? Mother comes first before father plays a vital role. I'm glad that today in the department, I don't know who has chosen this topic, when women narrate the nation. Just I was wondering what to say. Just if you refer in the scripture, in Proverbs 31, a lot of good qualities about just a minute, I just take it, okay. If you refer Proverbs 31, yeah, a lot of good things about a lady we could find there. Just read few verses, then let me close because Madam is waiting to give her chief guest address. A wife of noble character who can find. She is worth far more than rubies. A wife of noble character who can find. She is worth far more than rubies. Her husband has full confidence in her and lacks nothing of value. She brings him good, not harm, all the days of her life. She is like the merchant ships bringing her food from afar. She gets up while it is still dark. She provides food for her family and portions for her servant girls. She considers a field and buys it out of her earnings. She plants a vineyard. She sets about her work vigorously. Her arms are strong for her tasks. She seeks that her trading is profitable and her lamp does not go out at night. So dear friends, just like this, many good things have been spoken about the lady. So, dear friends, I'm glad that Madam, you gave a wonderful topic to Madam, when women narrate the nation. Of course, women are the source of solutions. Is it okay? When you talk about encumbrance, is it okay? Encumbrance. We always seek mother's help to find a appropriate solution for our problems. It may not be, let us say, an academic, isn't it? If we are a mathematician, how can I get a solution for a problem that you come across? But in life, the life is more important. We are here in this college for life. Teachers are here for life. Students are here for our life. For life, most of the problems, we always seek our mother's help, isn't it? So, dear friends, so I'm glad that that's a wonderful topic, encumbrance to emancipation. I'm sure in this conference, I just saw the schedule, we have as many as 10 parallel sessions. We have illustrious English teachers who contributed much to the field of different fields of English language, literature. I'm sure all will present from the hearts, from the mind, definitely all those ideas, the knowledge that will eliminate, that will annihilate all the problems which bother us to to come out in flying colors. Definitely, you will be benefited. I'm sure at the end of the day, all our participants will get charged, will be motivated, will be encouraged, will be enriched to think and fix their mind on the right path. At the juncture, I appreciate and congratulate the Department of English, Dr. Shobana, and the Secretary, Dr. Pavadi, and each and everyone who is responsible for this event to happen in our campus on virtual mode. I'm sure this day will be a memorable day for all the professors of not only our college, but also all the professors from other colleges who are online to listen to various lectures given by the illustrious resource persons. So without wasting much time, once again, I appreciate and congratulate. And definitely this National Ritual Seminar will be useful for everyone who takes part. All the best. God bless you all.
Thank you, sir, for your insightful words.
I now request Dr. G. Parvati, Associate Dean of Projects and Assistant Professor of English, the convener of this seminar, to introduce the keynote speaker.
Revered Principal and Patron, esteemed convener and head of the Department of English, Dr. Shobna, most respected members of the Advisory Board, Dr. Kadambari, former Director, Center for Women's Studies, Ithiraj College for Women, and Head Department of Gender Studies, Rajiv Gandhi National Institute of Youth Development, Dr. Rupkumar Balasingh, former Professor Emeritus and former Head of the Department of English, Dr. Suresh Frederick, the Dean of Research and Development and UG Head of the Department, Dr. C. Dhanapal, the Dean of Training and Placement and Coordinator Shift 2 of the Department, Dr. K. Shanti, Associate Dean of Arts and Coordinator, Department of Other Languages, Dr. A. Shiba Princess, Associate Dean of Training and Placement, learned professors, erudite research scholars, dynamic students from various prestigious institutions across India, our own distinguished alumni friends from far and wide, beloved students and staff of the department, I take this opportunity to pay my respects and formally welcome you to this national seminar. I'm immensely happy to introduce and welcome the doyen of Indian English literature, acclaimed writer, editor, cultural ambassador, and social activist Geeta Hariharan, a writer of profound intellect, literary stamina, and social consciousness. Geeta Hariharan was born in Coimbatore, India, and grew up in Bombay and Manila. She received a Bachelor of Arts honors degree in English Literature and Psychology from Bombay University in 1974 and a Master of Arts in Communication from the Graduate School of Corporate and Political Communication, Fairfield University, Connecticut in 1977. Her stellar stint as the editor of Orient Longman and a freelance professional editor for a range of academic institutions and foundations has reaped rich dividends in the fields of social science, fiction, and women's studies. Geeta Hariharan's published work includes novels, short stories, essays, newspaper articles, and columns. Her first novel, The Thousand Faces of Night, won the Commonwealth Writers' Prize for the Best Book of the Year in 1993. Her other novels include an experimental tour de force, The Ghosts of Asu Master, When Dreams Travel, In Times of Siege, Fugitive Histories, and the most recent, I Have Become the Tide. A collection of highly acclaimed short stories, The Art of Dying, appreciated by John Coetzee as a collection of beautifully written stories about death and its place in life, was published in 1993, and a book of stories for children, The Winning Team, in 2004. Her collection of essays, Almost Home, Cities and Other Places, was published in 2014. She has also edited a volume of stories in English translation from 4 major South Indian languages, A Southern Harvest. Co-edited a collection of stories for children, Sorry Best Friend, a collection of essays titled From India to Palestine, Essays in Solidarity, and co-edited Battling for India, A Citizen's Reader. Hariharan's fiction has been translated into a number of languages, including French, Italian, Spanish, German, Dutch, Greek, Urdu, and Vietnamese. Her essays and fiction have also been included in various anthologies. An alchemical writer and a much sought-after speaker, Geeta Hariharan is one of the co-founders of Indian Writers Forum, a platform for cultural politics, and a consulting editor to the forum's Journal of Culture, Guftgu. She has been a visiting professor in several universities, including Dartmouth College and George Washington University in the United States, the University of Canterbury at Kent in the UK, Nanyang Technological University in Singapore, and Jamia Millia Islamia and Goa University in India. On behalf of the students and staff of the Department of English, Bishop Heber College, I extend my humble gratitude to you, Madam, for gracing this occasion with your presence and invite you to deliver the keynote address. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I must begin with thanking the organizers. I hope I can be heard. Can I be heard? Yes. Can I be heard?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
Audible.
good. Yeah, thank you. I want to begin with thanking the organizers for having me. And while it's uncomfortable to use technology to speak at a distance, let's be grateful that we have this at least. I particularly want to thank Dr. Parvati, who's been patiently following up, organizing this particular event. It's a time when we need to speak about so many groups of people who do not have the voice in public space, in society at large, that they should. So whether it is caste or community, or whether it is the Adivasi voice, or whether it is the voice of the poor, or whether it is the voice of women. Now, why do we, readers and writers, why are we concerned with taking on the voice of these groups that are not heard? Why is it important for us to be part of this effort to hear more voices? Because finally, regardless of what syllabus and so forth tells you, the whole exercise of literature, the whole exercise of reading and writing, in fact, I might go so far as to say the whole exercise of education is to examine the power structures that hold us in their grip and to continuously move towards a more equal set of power structures. In other words, how do we share power more equably? And we might, in the course of today's conversation, I'm thinking of this more as a conversation, not as a lecture, we might think of ways and means, ask questions more than have, exact answers. Ask questions about what are the ways in which we can have a more equitable distribution of power. And power, I'm going to define for our purpose today as the visibility of a constituency, the voice being heard. To what extent is a particular voice heard? And that really is perhaps a kind of simple, crude index of how we may move towards emancipation. The principal has given us a very useful word today, emancipation. And I suggest we keep it at the back of our minds all through our conversation today. The alchemy lies in our common and collective struggle, which consists both of agreement as well as disagreement and debate about how we may move towards emancipation and actually effect this alchemy. What does alchemy mean? It's supposed to be a process of finding something precious, something valuable, gold from what seems like simple metal. So what is this process that we as readers, writers, students, teachers, but most of all as citizens, men and women, how do we understand first and then act on our understanding so as to speed up this process of alchemy and ensure further emancipation of groups such as women who have been historically suppressed, whose voices have been muted. This is an important metaphor that we understand in these times of Zoom. Let me actually, before we talk about narrating women or narrating the nation, let's talk about the power of narration. Why is this word narration so important? Why is the narrator so important? The storyteller, the historian, the chronicler, the person with the mic, the person who can be outside the household, outside the kitchen, on the streets, in the parliament, in public space with the microphone. What is the power of narration? It is, first of all, this is the only way the voice of the self at the simplest level, this is the only way the voice of the self can be shared with the general public. So till you know what my life is like, how will you know what my problems are as a woman? And the category of woman, of course, is a complex one. So your gender overlaps with other specifics, such as your caste, your class, your community, the region you live in. So there's a range of complexities. So how do you create that very complex balance between making the woman's voice audible in public space, but also all kinds of women. So not just upper class women or upper caste women or Hindu women, but how do you make a range of women's lives, the diversity of women's lives? How do you make that audible to other citizens first, and then to the general public? And that is how we are going to think of this unique experience of the self, because literature, after all, doesn't really talk in abstractions. It talks about specific individuals, assuming that you will use this particular human situation or situations, this particular human life, this particular interaction between individuals, this particular family maybe, to understand a larger group, to understand certain truths about that society and the times that they are located in. So I also have another way of looking at the power of women's writing. Throughout this conversation, there's going to be a lot of reference to the woman's body, because finally, in a patriarchal society, not just the Indian patriarchal society, but across the world, the woman is most visible as a body, as a biological creator, but in its worst avatar as a machine. So we are going to talk about the ways in which women are inscribed upon, if you like, their bodies are written upon with rules. Their bodies are the vessels of male honor as well as society's honor, and which is why in times of war, the women's bodies constitute yet another battlefield. But how do you move through this alchemical process we're talking of? From women as bodies that are inscribed upon with rules and prescriptions, to making women inscribers, to making them participate socially, economically, politically. How do they start writing, as it were? How do their stories get heard? And that is, of course, a process of making their voice more audible and their presence more visible. So, in other words, the people who write history have tremendous power, which is why you have large constituencies of people who have been traditionally marginalized in our society, whether it is the Dalits or whether it is women, to some extent Muslims. Where are they in our history? So literature too is a way of reclaiming that space in history. So was all our history conducted only by men of a particular sort, caste and community? No, of course not. So this is what we are going to look at. Now, I'm going to use a whole range of texts. You must be patient because we are not in the same space. I would have written the names on the blackboard if we had been in the same space. But I'm going to leave a lot of time for questions. So you could check on some of these texts that I'm referring to. Let's go back to the 19th century for a minute. What is the first step towards this alchemical process of joining the mainstream. Again, let me refer to what the principal said. He said very powerfully, knowledge is power. Now, absolutely, I don't think there's any argument there. Now, as students, we immediately want to ask, how do you get that knowledge? You know, we live in times where all of us are so lucky, those of us who are here, because we read. We take this miracle for granted that we've learned how to read, you see? Now, we women, and of course, people of a certain caste, certain class, there's a long history where we were not allowed to learn how to read. So if you start with the simple premise that knowledge is power, and one of the obvious ways of gaining knowledge is to read and to also hear what other people have learned over the centuries, because of course, when it comes to knowledge, nobody reinvents the wheel. We stand on the shoulders of those who've gone before us. So this is what education is all about. You learn what other people had to say, and then you make up your own mind. But for this, you need reading and you need community. You need to go out in public space. It's very difficult to gain an education all on your own. Okay, so of course, we come from a background where even if you heard the scriptures and you were female or of a certain caste, the recommendation was that hot lead should be, poured into your ears. So there was that kind of exclusion from knowledge. Now, it is in that context that I want you to consider the life of a particular woman in the 19th century. All through this conversation, we're going to have dreadful examples of exclusion, but also very brave examples of possible strategies of inclusion. Because, people just don't take being suppressed forever. There are those among us who will always show us how to move forward towards the goal that we yearn for, which is knowledge or a process of emancipation, which is becoming visible and audible to other people. And that actually gives meaning to your life because you become truly a part of the community. So Roshundari Devi in the 19th century in Bengal, she gets married. There's child marriage prevalent at the time, and she goes to her husband's home. Now, this is an affluent family, so they're landowning. Now, throughout, please pay attention to the range of women I'm going to talk about, whether it is, so we will go from the upper class and upper caste to the, to the Paraya community, to the Mahar community, to the Mang community. But you see a range of specifics, a range of problems in each of these situations. But throughout, there is a basic level of being held back, being hemmed in, however affluent you are, because you are a woman. So Roshundari Devi absolutely longed to read religious texts, but she couldn't read. And she also had something to say, so she wanted to write. Now, how did she do this? She was among the first, not just women, but among the first autobiographers in Bangla. She wrote an autobiography called Amar Jibon, which was published in 1876. Now, first of all, the struggle to learn how to read. She had to actually tear little sheets of paper from her son's reader. And in the kitchen, as she was cooking for a huge extended family, she would learn each of the letters. And to her great credit, she actually wrote an autobiography. Now, what did she write about? What did she know? She wrote of her world. She wrote of the world, a world of endless cooking. She had 12 children. She gave birth to 12 children. So of what a mother's life was. Now, what was important about this autobiography? It wasn't just the fact that here was a woman who wrote the autobiography, but because she was writing about the woman's body, what pregnancy was like, what childbirth was like, she was calling attention to the fact that these are not subjects that are taboo, that this is what large numbers of human beings in the world experience. So these aspects of experience are also worth talking about, and they're not to be hidden away in some interior room of the house. So in terms of subject matter. Second, she also countered the official male narrative about the Griha Lakshmi. You know, one of the ways in which patriarchy coaxes women to remain within their prescribed norms is by deifying them, by putting them on a pedestal. If you say you are a goddess of the kitchen, you're the goddess of the household, you're a goddess as a mother, it pretends to elevate you, but it does not really consider you an equal citizen, which is the contract that we live in today in this nation with a constitution. So this is what Roshundari Devi did. She demythified this figure. And throughout, as we talk about different women and their texts, we are going to find that that is the process, that you're not saying that motherhood is not important. You are not saying that somebody must do the day-to-day work. But she said very realistically that kitchen work, household work, motherhood is full of drudgery. And please, this doesn't mean we're going to stop doing it, but acknowledge this. And this takes up a large part of women's lives. Now, you see, you might wonder what all this has to do with literature. But when we look at the link between literature and power structures, literature and politics, literature and the nation, then we're talking about what are the lives that are written about? What are the lives that are foregrounded, and what are the lives and aspects of experience that become invisible? And that is how you look at women actually narrating their lives and moving forward to say that this is what our lives are like, this is what we would like our lives to be, and saying we too are part of the nation. There is an interesting point here before I go on to Lalitambika Antarjanam. Throughout, I also want you to think in terms of, we've spoken of the kitchen and endless household work. A concept that's really important when you're talking about women's lives and women's writing is the concept of space. I have spoken about the public domain, public space. But we also have a certain valorization for the students, that this is made into something important and glamorous, that women's tales are in the kitchen. In fact, we had a very well-known writer who said, that his grandmother's stories are in the kitchen and in the backyard, and how important that is. This is an important way of recognizing their stories, what are called folk tales or women's tales or kitchen tales. And we all know them. You know, very often they have very clever old women and so on. And men's stories are in the front yard or on the street or in public space. Now, while it's important to acknowledge the wealth of tales that we have and proverbs and so on, which is considered a kind of women's literature and monopoly, it is also important to say that if women are to be an active part of society and of the nation, if women are to contribute their narrative to the national narrative, that their stories cannot be confined to these internal spaces. They should move to the front yard. Now, you will find as we talk about lives that this is particularly important because so often the women narrators are physically located and bound and circumscribed by the inner parts of the household, whether it is through parda, whether it is by being made into an Antarjanam, which is a person inside, people living inside the household. And that actually, of course, gets defined again by caste and community. So let's look at one of these examples, Lalitambika Antarjanam, who her dates are 1909 to 1987. Now, she was a member of the Nambudiri community. So again, you know, I want to look at a range of women writers. We've looked at Roshandra Devi, who came from a landed family in a village. And now Lalitambika Antarjanam, who was, you know, she learned Sanskrit at home and so on, and they were well-off Nambudiris, Brahmins. Now, there was the terrible practice of the Antarjanam. Now, all these things are really important because it wasn't so long ago, and we still live with the residue of this recent past. Now, there is an aspect to this Antarjanam world, which is that it is not just that you are physically hidden from other people's eyes, and so your voice is muffled, but also there is another strategy in which your body, the female body, becomes the vessel that holds the rules of patriarchy, the rules of custom, the rules of caste, the rules of the community. And very often this is translated into something called honor. And I do hope all of you will have many arguments on what real honor might consist of. So not just individual male honor, not just family honor, but the community's honor, and indeed the nation's honor. So women's bodies are taxed with this extra job to preserve the rules of the community. That it could be a rule such as men from other families can't see you. It could be, you know, all kinds of, you can't go outside the house without being covered. So a whole range of, you can't marry somebody from another community, and so on and so forth. Okay, let's look at Lalitambika Antarjanam's work. She wrote a wonderful story, which, of course, those of you who can read Malayalam can read it in the original, but in translation, it's called The Goddess of Revenge, Pratikara Devata. Now, this is about a real life story, a rather famous story in Kerala of a young woman called Savitri, Tatri she was called, and her husband naturally introduces her to sex, and but then rejects her and prefers to go to prostitutes. And she doesn't know what to do. And finally, in a certain fury of revenge, she becomes a prostitute herself. And in 1905, there was a kind of traditional court hearing, and she says, yes, I was completely wrong and I did this, but let me also list all the men who sinned along with me, and names as many as 64 people. And the king of Kochi gets very worried that he might be the 65th, and they stop it. Now, Lalitambika does something very interesting with the story, because Tatri's ghost comes to her while she's sitting there and saying, what should I write about? In other words, the question of what should women be writing about? So then she decides to write about Tatri because it is so puzzling. There is no straight black and white story here, as in so many stories in life. So she's asking the question, what should women write about? She's asking the question of how liable was Savitri, but how liable were the men also who went with her. She also says something very, very interesting. She scolds Tatri and says, should you have rebelled at an individual level and taken this rather crazy step? Or should you have got all the Nambudiri women together, and would collective action have been more sensible? Would it have meant less harm to yourself? So this is an extremely interesting political question about, should the individual work only at the individual level, or is there strength in the collective? So that was Lalitambika Antarjanam. Let's move on from narrating the self to narrating the collective, because as you all know, that is the process of all life, that you move from the self to the collective, the family, the community, and then, of course, the world at large. Again, let's go back to, I must request Parvati or somebody to keep track of the time for me so that I don't go on forever. So do raise your hand if I'm going on for too long. Caste, of course, is our country's unique contribution to division, to stratification, to oppression in the world. And I think that, again, going back to the principal's use of the word emancipation, it immediately brings to mind the emphasis Ambedkar made, which is that all change, it's not enough to say everybody's equal and for a constitution to say that, but those promises that we make must move towards emancipatory equality. So let's go back to a very interesting young woman. By the way, if you want to read some of these women's work and about their lives briefly, do have a look at an excellent pair of volumes put together on women writing in India by Susie Taru and K. Lalita. I hope you have them in your libraries because they're really worth looking at. So this is a young woman called Muktabai who went to the school that Savitri Bai Phule and Jyotiba Phule set up. And at the age of 14, her dates are 1841. We don't know when she died. We don't know what else she wrote. We don't know anything else about her. But we have this piece that she wrote as a 14-year-old called About the Griefs of the Mangs and the Mahars, two of the Dalit communities. Now, what is she doing? She's actually being polemical. She is moving on to pretty bold ground. And she says, we've been driven from our own lands. and the upper castes are acting as if religion is their own property, you will find very often that one of the moves towards emancipation is by saying that you don't have to tell us, the upper caste or men, what religion's all about. We want a direct participation in religion, which of course includes temple entry and so on. So she says that even children are divided by caste. And she also makes another interesting point, that the division is not just between upper caste and lower caste, but among castes. So she says, look at the divisions between the Mahars and the Mangs, with the Mahars considering themselves superior to Mangs. And of course, divide and rule is a very old principle of rulers. In fact, let me quote one sentence so you get the sharpness of her voice. "O learned Pandits, wind up the selfish prattle of your hollow wisdom and listen to what I say." Now, in that sentence, in a way, you see what happens when women's voices are made audible, and she is wanting to narrate the nation. This is the space we live in, where you have division between high and low, caste-wise, among castes, and she says, this is what women suffer under this division. This is what children suffer under this division. So there is Muktabai. Suppose we move on to another Maharashtrian Marathi text, Baby Kamble. That's 1929 to 2012. And she again wrote autobiography. But unlike Roshandore Devi, she wrote the autobiography of her Mahar community. And this was called Jina Amucha. It was serialized. It's translated into English. It's called The Prisons We Broke. And this is a very powerful title. It tells you pretty much what she's talking about. It was possibly the first such narrative by a Dalit woman. And she describes in graphic detail what the Mahar community of the time was like. Very difficult reading. Let me quote a bit. "We were just like animals, but without tails," she says, describing a world of lice-infested rags for saris, feasts comprising maggot-ridden innards of deceased carcasses, the tearing hunger of starving new mothers, babies cleaned with saliva instead of soap, and intestine-damaging cactus pods consumed to quell hunger. So women occupy pride of place in this narrative, and she describes the day-to-day life, the difficulties, the terrible poverty, the terrible pushing, the physical exclusion to outside the village of the Mahars. And she also offers something that we have not encountered with the other women so far, which is she talks about her family being inspired by Ambedkarite thoughts. So there is this beginning of hope that instead of only talking about what is terrible, yes, we must talk about what there is, but what is the way forward? And she and her family consider some of Ambedkar's thoughts as a possible beginning of a solution. If we come closer to our time, a very dear friend of mine, somebody you must, of course, hear because she's very much in your part of the world, Bama. Now, Bama's autobiography, again, called Karukku, she talks about the spatial division of the village because of caste. We spoke about how women are pushed to the kitchen and the backyard, or like Antarjanams kept inside and allowed to come out only at the mercy of the men of the family. But Bama is also talking about what caste does to the mapping of the village. She says that the village extends just up to the bus terminus, as if our entire world ended there. And it's divided into clear pockets of caste. So her own community, the agricultural laborers, the parayas, she says, I don't know how it came about that the upper caste communities and the lower caste communities were separated like this into different parts of the village. But they kept themselves to their part of the village and we stayed in ours. We only went to their side if we had to do work there. But they never came to our parts. Why should they? Because the post office, the panchayat board, the milk depot, the big shops, the church, the schools, all these stood in their streets. So why would they need to come to our area? So she also describes what it means to be the first generation to go to school, that you have to come to terms with the fact that your grandmother still calls a little child Ayya, that you hold your hands for water poured from a height of 4 feet into your cupped hands, or eating leftovers, being taunted in school, and so on. Now, there's an interesting point here. In what language do you narrate your life? In what language do you narrate your society, your community, the nation, by extension? Bama wrote of the women in her village in the language that they spoke in, which was earthy, which was brave, because day-to-day life meant not only poverty and difficulty, but also dealing with the patriarchal notions of their own men as well as upper caste men. So Bama got into trouble for the language she used, and her own village felt that you're blackening us. On the other hand, the literary establishment felt that this is not beautiful language and therefore is not literature. It actually took some 6 months, she tells me, of persuasion on the part of the young people in the village to get her to come back to the village and for her to be accepted. So this is yet another question. As I told you, there's a whole range of questions that I'm going to zip through. Let me look at yet another young, relatively young writer today, again from your part of the world, Salma. Salma is actually Rajati Samshuddin, and she had to assume a pen name because of her writing and the community. So she wrote poetry initially, very often about the body, and again, taboo, writing about the woman's body, important though it is to human survival, important though it is to society, in a sense, both positively in a biological sense and negatively as this vessel of honor and patriarchy. She had to assume a pen name so as to avoid disapproval, initially from her family as well and the community at large. But again, her story, not just the story she writes, but her own story, is cause for inspiration, because not only did the family accept her writing finally, when it emerged that this is what she was doing, but in fact, she has occupied quite literally a certain political space, first at the panchayat and then, in a higher level. So what are her stories like? She's talking about the Muslim woman's experience, the Muslim girl's experience. So she's, for example, let me give you a few little examples of what are the kind of women she's talking about. There is an anonymous girl in one of her stories called Podum Punna, a kind of enough girl, because now the family is hoping that there will be no more girls. So this poor child is named Podum Ponnu. There's another girl who is married and sent off to somewhere outside India, and she says she refuses to live with him and comes back, and the rest of her life is sort of decided by that one act of daring. So there's a divorced young woman, Maimoon. Her parents plan to get her married again, but first they have to do something about the baby she's carrying. This is the these are stories in which there is loneliness, there's desire, and yearning for love, yearning for understanding. There's also, again, we were talking about space. In many of the stories, you might have the doorbell ring and the girls who have come of age run away. So there is this unspoken, unwritten rule that you must not be seen once you have come of age. So this is, you'll see a range of circumscribed lives in rural Tamil Nadu, among the Muslim community. Her more recent stories, which you will find in English translation in a collection called The Curse and Other Stories, you have more humor. There's one called Karagamani TV, where a woman decides that she will sell her Mangal Sutra to buy a big television because really she prefers to escape her life through the television. There's also a story on toilets, the difficulty that women face with their bodies in public space. So you have that kind of somewhat unorthodox, but very important to acknowledge. I do want to point out that some of these might seem, is this literature? Indeed it is. Anything about human experience, if written with skill, written with empathy, qualifies as literature. We cannot have the kind of colonial hangover telling us what literature is. I'm going to have a quick look at the time. Okay, so I see that one of the other speakers is going to talk about Mahashweta, so I do apologize, because I cannot talk about the body and women and the nation without talking about Mahashweta. So if we look at the body both literally and as metaphor for the nation, Mahashweta is extremely important for us because there's a pair of her stories, Stanadaini, which has been translated as breast giver, and the story Draupadi. If you look at these two stories together, you get a rather amazing commentary on unintended as well as intended violence against women, but also using the woman's body not just as a site for warfare, but also as a metaphor for the nation. Let's see how. In the first one, Stanadaini, breast giver, there is a wet nurse called Jasoda who, breastfeeds professionally. She's called a professional mother. So she's hired as a wet nurse and she feeds a number of babies. But finally, she is left alone to suffer breast cancer. So it's possible to read this as an ungrateful society, an ungrateful nation for the structure, the almost invisible substructure of work, of women, particularly of certain class and caste, who carry on their shoulders, in this case, the uterus, the weight of the nation. the weight of society, the weight of patriarchal society. So there is the breast giver. And here is a rather gloomy kind of diagnosis of society, because at the end, here she is, after all her sacrifice, her generosity, her abundance, the milk of human kindness, this is what she gets. But you have to read this story with Draupadi, because in the Draupadi story, where in fact this young Adivasi activist is called Draupadi, instead of the Sanskritized Draupadi, there is some sort of very complex, not solution, but balance offered to the bleak ending of breast giver. In Draupadi, for those of you who don't know, very briefly, the story is that this was around the time of the emergency. It was written around then. The Adivasi activist is caught, and there is an anti-Naxal operation going on, and this highly not learned, but well-read, educated counter-terrorism operator, Senanayak, is there with his men, and Draupadi is caught in the forest. And as punishment, before she's questioned, she is gang raped by the security chaps. Now, it makes for terrible reading, but it is also very real that one way of punishing those who come out of their houses, their kitchens, to be activists, to actually choose what kind of world they want to live in, that they will be punished precisely through the violation of their bodies. Now, there's a very startling end to the story where Draupadi is summoned by Senanayak, the counterterrorism boss, and she emerges. They ask her to wear her clothes and she refuses. Now, this is a very disturbing and complex resolution of the story, because she comes out and says, you can strip me again. You can strip me, but can you clothe me again? Are you a man? Which is to say, almost, that you can take away my power from me. That is easy enough. You strip my clothes, you attack my body, you wreak violence on my body. But can you do the more difficult thing, which is to protect me, to honor me, not make me a vessel of honor, your honor? Can you clothe me? Can you, in fact, as your principal said, help me towards a more joyful, equitable life? So, in a sense, what is both troubling and challenging about the story is that she uses her agency, her voice, through her ravaged body. Now, this is what literature can do. It can offer you insights which are not black and white, insights which are troubling, but also full of possibilities. And those are the insights we have to unravel to understand how women narrate the nation, that they can only narrate the nation with their own bodies, with the experiences, whether in the kitchen, the drudgery, or the violence of assault and rape, and then talk about how that fits within the nation and how they would like to be emancipated from this. I also want, in conclusion, I wanted to make a reference to some of my own work, because I've spoken about such a range of writers. In my first novel, The Thousand Faces of Night, I was struggling to write about 3 generations of Indian women, their lives, struggling to write about their lives. But their lives seemed so spare, so slim, so empty. And which is why I had to go to the myths and the tales to actually see what was holding their lives and sort of shrinking them. It was these prescriptive myths that you have to be like Sita, you have to be, when we were growing up, we'd be told, don't let your hair loose because you'll be like Kali, So the prescription of the myths, which are still very much alive, as we know, even in current day India. But also that some of the myths themselves offer possibilities of subversion, which just means that you take it, twist it, and say that Sita too could do this, that Surpanaka was not necessarily an ugly woman. So what are you doing? You're rewriting, because this is something, myths belong to all of us, tales belong to all of us. It's our common inheritance. So how do we make them live for our times? We own them. So suppose we retell them. How do we make them have meaning for the young people in our times? So this is one way in which I thought women's lives could be looked at. Then I thought in When Dreams Travel, the old story of Scheherazade. I wanted very much to say that while Scheheryar, the Sultan, Scheheryar is supposed to be the friend of the city, but there he is, wanting a virgin every night in the frame story of the Arabian Nights, and killing them, chopping off their heads the next morning. And Scheherazade, of course, escapes that fate by telling stories. So this is the classic example of somebody whose body, you remember I spoke of the body being inscribed upon, and how the alchemical process of narration actually allows you to become the inscriber. And that is really what Scheherazade, who is perhaps the most powerful symbol of the speaking woman, the writing woman, the inscriber woman, that's what she does. Not only does she save her life through her stories, she actually brings salvation to Scheheryar, to the Sultan, by making him understand that he cannot demand a certain kind of chastity from women, that it's women who have to determine how they will live with their bodies. So that is, a kind of complex power negotiation that happens in the Arabian Nights, which I used both literally and as metaphor in my novel, When Dreams Travel. So I'm going to say in conclusion that there is a continuous struggle between the impulse to exclude women, particularly women of a certain caste and community and background and class, of course, and the pushback from women writers to a more inclusive situation. So there is a continuous, we can think in terms of all kinds of binaries, tradition, modernity, and so on and so forth. But I think inclusion and exclusion would be a very useful pair, because there is a continuous level at which you have, say, inclusion of women. But is there a caste inclusion there? Is there a language inclusion there? So the multiplicity of exclusions on the one hand, and the multiplicity of inclusions on the other. And the goal is, therefore, arguably, building an alliance among different constituencies, among different movements, like Lalitambika Antarjanam, let's say the individual rebel is useful, but only so useful. But how do you get the collective to move towards change, and therefore emancipation of all those whose voices have been traditionally suppressed, rendered inaudible, and unmute them for all to hear. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am, for your engaging, insightful, and inspiring address. And now I think it's time for the questions. There is one question in the chat box. I would like to read that for you. Ma'am, would you say that Rasundari Devi's overemphasis on the works of God is actually extremely sardonic and controversial, which even makes her publication theologically vulnerable? So I come again with the question.
Yeah, could you repeat the question, please?
Would you say that Rasundari Devi's overemphasis on the works of God is actually extremely sardonic and controversial, which even makes her publication theologically vulnerable?
Actually, insofar as I know, and insofar as I can read, this was a genuine desire to gain strength from what she saw as words, religious words, text that would give her strength. Because, to begin with, she comes as almost a child, far away, leaving her beloved mother behind, and she has to get used to this large new family. Now, what do you gather strength from as a lonely individual, as somebody who has no respite from service to the family? You can be physically, you can be cooking, and you can be looking after the baby and so on. But there is the mind, that wants to gain courage from something. And so her longing, at least insofar as we know, of course, from her writing, is to read religious texts. And that is what her husband is reading, that is what her son is being taught to read, and she wants to be included in that knowledge, which she sees a direct link between that knowledge and the power to gain that knowledge with a certain peace of mind, with a certain strength that she will get from her religion. So we have to always look at all these individual lives in that context, you see? So, and look at a wide range of contexts, from different religions to an atheist context. So we have to look at all these contexts if we are to understand what different groups of people actually get strength from. So no, I don't think that there was any theological trouble, unless you're going to say that in a religious context where women would not be the word givers, would not be perform priestly functions, that would her writing be troublesome? I don't think so, because her impulse is to read it, to partake of it, and to gain strength from it. So I don't think she was writing theology.
Thank you, ma'am. There's another question. Aren't the god and goddesses of our nation the outcome of men narratives? May you reflect upon the act of women narratives accepting these religious ideas.
Well, I don't think religion, this is a huge question. It's actually a question for a PhD. Now, there are arguments that we had a lot of mother goddesses. Of course, you have Mariamman and so on. And that over a period of time, we're talking, of course, about a very long time ago, but that the more patriarchal gods, just as you have the fairer gods, because after all, Krishna and all of them were dark. So you have a kind of southward movement, and you have what shall I say, the more upper caste gods. I hesitate to say upper caste, but that is what it is. I mean, we had these recent arguments about Shabarimala and so on. But so I think that all over the world, there were the mother goddess was perhaps one of the first local gods. That the mother goddess was associated with fertility, with a good harvest, with rains, and so on and so forth. But we are talking, it becomes very difficult because we are talking about bodies of myth, we're talking of bodies of tales, and we're talking about organized religion as well as personal religion, because, in medieval times, Christianity also had a very strong strain of mysticism, where you had a personal relationship with God, just as our Bhakti movements attempted. So we cannot just say religion, because you're talking about an entire kind of ocean of ideas. Organized religion reflects, of course, the society that it is based in. We're talking about institution. I'm not talking about specific gods and goddesses. I'm talking about organized religion, the orthodoxy. And the orthodoxy, of course, is created and held in place by those who are in power. So, of course, they exclude people who are not in power. And the excluded include women and people of certain castes and so forth. So that is why I went on about inclusions and exclusions. It's sort of like looking at our personal laws. The personal laws were the customary laws were made by people in power. So of course they excluded women because they were not in power. Of course they excluded lower castes because they were not in power. I think that's a more complicated way to see it.
Thank you, ma'am. There's one more question. Could you please reflect on how women readers have responded to a story like Draupadi or Lady Coupe? Have you come across such responses in your travel as a writer?
You get a very wide range of reactions as a writer. And after all, you're never going to meet all your readers. So I don't want to make too much of the few responses I have had, personally. Perhaps the story I've read in public, which has got the most reaction, is a story called The Remains of the Feast, which was actually about my great-grandmother. And who was as a Brahmin widow, what were the things that she was denied and how much she yearned for those things. And the extraordinary thing is that I can think of two specific instances. Once in Singapore, where a Chinese woman came up to me after the reading and said, this is exactly what happened to my mother-in-law, that she asked for all kinds of things that she was not allowed to eat as she was dying. And then similarly, some small place in Germany, where somebody started crying, much to my alarm, and said, you've really written a story about my mother. So, in a way, while you're writing about something quite specific to India, quite specific to a South Indian Brahmin widow, yet This is, of course, both the power and the ability of literature, that it could mean something to a woman, a Chinese woman in Singapore, and a German woman, you know? So I don't want to exaggerate this kind of, or romanticize this bond of sisterhood that, women can speak to women, or romanticize the power of literature and say that it can speak to anybody. But we have to keep that in mind. We have to keep that in mind while not flattening and making it all so universal that we lose sight of the differences of location. But those are the kind of responses I've got, the good responses. The bad responses are not necessarily from women, and they're not necessarily about my women characters. It's mostly about people who don't want me to say the kind of things I do.
Thank you, ma'am. There's one more question. Ma'am, what do you think is the responsibility of writers, particularly towards society, especially women writers towards society?
You know, a lot of people will say that you cannot have, I mean, writers are just like performers, and, you know, you don't have any specific responsibility. I'm unable to share that opinion. I think at two levels. One is that you have been given the power of this voice, a particular voice with words, you know, that words, that your whole life is a question of trading with words, trying to find ways to name the unnameable with words. So this ability, this vocation makes it really important that you use this ability, this vocation, to name those experiences that are not named, to try and imagine what those voices that are suppressed would sound like if they were heard. Now, obviously, I don't know all these lives. I can't live all those experiences. But then that is the point of being a writer, that all of us in our day-to-day lives try and imagine, what is it like for me to be you? What is it like to be you? Because only then I can understand not only you, but myself and the world the two of us inhabit together. So as a writer, this is what you do full time. You try and enter other people's minds, other worlds that you don't know, and learn about them. So, which is why your text is not necessarily an answer, it's not necessarily authoritative, but it is imagination, it is speculation. If I were you, living as you do, what would I do in this particular human situation? You know, so I think the responsibility of the writer has always been huge. But I want to add there's a wonderful South African writer called Andre Brink, and he said that in times of siege, the writer's responsibility is more. Society needs the writer even more, because this is what we do. We question. This is what we do. We say, look, we push through the text to ask ourselves questions as well as our readers questions. And in these times where our voices, so many voices are being muffled, there is so much division, there is so much hate mongering, it's all the more important for writers to speak up and to use our little bit of public space to say things which will bring us all together, which will include us all in this country called India.
Thank you, ma'am. A word of advice from you as to how the teaching of women's writing, especially novels and poems, should be attempted would be helpful.
You know, to begin with, I want to say that this is not a question of men versus women or boys versus girls. This is a question of those who believe in equality, those who believe in emancipation, those who want to include and make our common lives even richer, versus those who want to exclude, who want one little pure world with no doubt or disagreement. This is actually what the two opposing camps are, not men versus women. Let me say that. This is really important. So all the boys and men listening, you're very much part of this joint enterprise. So when it comes to education, I think that it's not such a good idea to separate women's studies and have that as a special thing. Instead, we should have in every syllabus, in every course, in every subject, include more texts by women, more lives, include even what I call the failed action. You know, there have been so many, even when it comes to science, you know, there have been figures, women figures, who history does not do justice to, or whose achievements were limited by the fact that they were women, or whose achievements were taken over by other people. So always have an awareness, I think, that there are women as well, you know, in the subject, involved in some indirect way in the subject. As for literature, I think that, you know, we have to make a gradual effort to mainstream these texts, to have, just as we want to replace the English canon, that at one time all our literature courses had nothing but texts by, you know, white men from England. Not that we should stop reading this thing. I mean, life would be terrible if we didn't have Shakespeare, for example. But how do we include more, you know, from different backgrounds, different languages? So I would say that diversity of text, diversity of genre, and a certain measure of eclectic choice, I think that would be the best way to have texts from women, from Dalit texts and so on, and a lot of translation.
Thank you, ma'am. And a participant wants to know that why you have chosen up male protagonists in your works, like such as Ghost of Vasu Master and In Times of Siege. Any specific reason for that?
Yes, you know, that's a very nice question, but you know, I wasn't just making a politician's speech just now when I said it's not men versus women. I can't imagine my life without the men in it. But as a writer, when I first wrote the Thousand Faces of Night, there was a lot of, I got a lot of pats on the back, and I was told that, yes, she's a woman, so, you know, we should believe what she says about women. Now, writers are not specialists, you know, just as we cannot have the experience of all the people we write about, which is why we have to use imagination and observation and knowledge that we with difficulty gain about other parts of you know, other constituencies, other parts of society. Similarly, that is part of the excitement of being a writer and reader. You want to understand how not just a man, but different men, you know, there's a huge difference between Sultan Shahryar in When Dreams Travel and this very gentle old man in The Ghost of Vasu Master. So to make it complex and not just say men and women like this, but an entire complex spectrum of gender. You know, after the first novel was published and I was told, oh, she writes about women. And I thought to myself, you know, I don't want to, of course, everything I write will be informed by my political convictions, whether it is about women or about society and so on. But I'm not a specialist. I'm not going to write only about women in the foreground. So The Ghosts of Vasu Master, I wrote because I had some very basic questions about what really is teaching all about? What is learning all about? You know, so I wanted a man in the foreground, but you know, a lot of people thought The Thousand Faces of Night is autobiographical, and then I had to say, no, actually, The Ghosts of Vasu Master is more autobiographical, because I was bringing up two children and I was very, very involved in what their learning process might be. So, but that is the beauty of being a writer. You know, things are not so obvious. Things are not always what they seem.
Thank you, ma'am. Another question. Why do women depicted in today's literature refuse to surrender between the conservative forces of fatalism and subjugation?
Well, it's not just today, you know, and there's all kinds of literature written. As long as there has been storytelling, and here it's not just what we call literature because it's printed, but you know, all the stories, the huge body of tales that you know, we are heir to. You always, as in real life, you always have characters who will not submit, and you always have characters who will be defeated. But I want to make a point here. If you look at different points in time, if you look at some of our very brave grandmothers, and you consider what you might think of as failed action, you know, brave women who, say, went on a fast because they wanted to learn how to read, or who did not want to marry as a child, but somehow tried to live a larger life. I'm thinking of, for example, Subbalakshmi, not the famous Subbalakshmi, but Maithili Shivaraman's grandmother, Subbalakshmi, who, in fact, even a wonderful Moroccan sociologist called Fatima Mernissi, her grandmother, who lived all her life in a harem, the grandmother was called Yasmina, told her that it is your responsibility to explore and discover Allah's beautiful planet. So throughout history, there are instances of real life women as well as fictional characters in both women's writing and men's writing who either give up or who don't. That is the diversity of which life and literature are made.
Thank you very much, ma'am. And I would ask this question as a representative of of our students in Bishop Weber College, because we have lots of writers and many students have published their works. And what would be your advice to those budding writers?
Yes, well, you're a brave lot, because writing is a difficult and lonely life, but that's not what you want to hear. I would say two things, three. One, don't give up. Keep writing, keep reading and writing. I like to say I like inhaling and exhaling. So how much can you write in a life? But you can read a lot. So keep reading, because those are your best teachers. You know, even as you're writing a story or a poem or a book, all I have to do is, you know, these are my teachers at the back. So if I have trouble doing something and I want some really practical advice, I take down one of the books and, you know, look, they're my teachers, even if many of them are dead. So reading continuously, keep writing. It really is an itch that you have to promote. So there's no substitute for writing any number of drafts, revising again and again. Don't be in a rush to publish. You will have many chances in life, you know. So don't be in a rush to publish. Keep working at it. Then it's important to have feedback, but finally listen to the critic in your own head, because you're going to get a lot of confusing responses. So listen to that, because it's intelligent to take criticism, but finally, to make sense of it all and to apply it to your writing, you will have to trust yourself and you will have to learn to live a solitary life. But it has its own rewards. It's well worth it.
Smashing, ma'am. And this we'll take it as a concluding question. Indian women emancipated in terms of writing as a profession, and what is your estimation? How far have they succeeded in narrating the nation?
Well, to begin with, it's not a profession, because very few writers, male or female, can live on their writing. So, which is why I use the word vocation, because as you know, most writers have to do something else to pay the bills and put food on the table. But I definitely think that writing has brought women, people of a certain caste, people of a certain community, to public notice. And while writing cannot really change the world in that simplistic sense, what it can do is sow doubt in the reader's mind, begin some process of debate, perhaps, and most important, stimulate your imagination and say, hey, this is what other lives are like. This is what a woman's life is like in a particular community, in this part of India, in this part of the world. And in so far as that power goes, I think we can really be pleased with the range of women's voices that we've heard, and perhaps a kind of sad index of their power is how many of them are censored or hounded and questioned today.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for your patience and answering questions and sharing your valuable thoughts. Let the voices of the encumbered be heard and let them be emancipated. We would like to take you as an example for this. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you so much. And to all the students there, please feel free to send me questions to my site. I'd be very happy to answer them. For me, it is a delight to speak to students and members of a university and college community. And I do hope at some point we can meet each other face to face. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, ma'am. Dear participants, we thank you all for your active interaction and thought-provoking questions. Due to time constraint, we come to the end of the discussion, but we assure you that all your questions will be forwarded to the speaker and be clarified later on. Thank you. I now invite Dr. G. Parvati to introduce the speaker of the plenary session.
We have enough reasons to be happy and proud today, as we have a galaxy of galvanizing speakers, two of whom are the distinguished alumna of our own department, And here, the resource person for the plenary session is one of our distinguished alumna, Dr. U. Sumati, Associate Professor and Head, Department of English, Government Arts College Autonomous, Coimbatore. An astute academician known for her diligent, disciplined, and dedicated teaching for more than 2 decades. Dr. Sumati's area of specialization include eco-criticism, theory and practice, Indian English literature, and post-colonial literature. She has authored 2 books titled Eco-Criticism in Practice and Vaishnavite Eco-Theology. Dr. Sumati has 19 publications to her credit and has presented papers in international and national conferences across the country. She has successfully guided 11 PhD and 17 MPhil scholars. Dr. Sumati undertook a major research project titled The Environmental Relevance of Vaishnavism, founded by the UGC and completed in 2013. She has also successfully completed a UGC-sponsored minor research project on the role of eco-criticism in creating environmental awareness in 2009. On this day of days, I accord Dr. Sumati a warm welcome and wish her a happy homecoming to her alma mater. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Dr. Parvati. I'm very glad indeed, and good morning to everybody. Thank you very much for inviting me to Bishop Heber once again. I'm honored indeed to have been given this platform and this space. I thank the management and the principal and the organizers of this virtual seminar, Department of English, the head of the Department of English, Dr. Shobana, and the organizing secretary, Dr. Parvati. I wish to make use of this opportunity to share my thoughts on the dawn of Indian literature, Mahashweta Devi. Hope I'm audible.
Yes, ma'am, you're audible.
Yeah. Are you able to see my screen, my PPT?
No, ma'am.
Okay. 1 second, please. Now?
Yes, ma'am. It's visible.
Okay. Yeah, fine. I think it's fine now.
Yes, ma'am.
Can I continue?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Yes, I wish to share my thoughts on Mahashweta Devi, and Madam Geeta Hariharan has set the tone for the seminar, and she has covered the entire gamut of women writers and their experiences. In the beginning of this lecture, I just want to show the different facets of Mahashweta Devi before going on to show how research is possible on Mahashweta Devi in the various areas, and before narrowing it down to my area, that is environmental justice. So, as we all know, that the most dominant facet of her personality is that of a creative writer, and she has 94 published titles of fiction to her credit, and that is proof enough. And she thought that the experiences that she is sharing, the experiences that she is sharing is common to all the indigenous people living all over the world. So she allowed her works to be translated, and you have complete works translated in English, Italian, German, French, apart from many Indian languages. The second facet that comes to the fore is that of the journalist, because she thought that social reform is at the core of all her writings. And she used her articles in newspapers and journals, some of which she edited. She used that as a platform to critique or make scathing comments on some of the policies of the government. And the third facet is that of the activist. And in Mahashweta Devi, we have a very rare combination of a writer and an activist. She does not believe in standing on the pulpit and just giving preaching. She got down to the grassroots level. She traveled deep into the rural pockets where the tribal people lived. She lived with them, and she organized and she mobilized movements and where through which the indigenous people could raise their voice, through which they could fight or struggle for their needs, basic needs and rights. So that is why she's called as the mother of the suburbs. And to the student of literature who wants to work on Mahashweta Devi, we have so many avenues open because her writings are so rich. They lend themselves to various types of analysis. The obvious one being that of the post-colonial writer. And because she essentially talks about marginalization and the voices that are oppressed and suppressed. So very easily we can align the writings of Mahashweta Devi to the theories of post-colonialism. Okay, so I just wish to give some examples. Like we have a text called Key Concepts. All of you students would have been familiar. Key Concepts, written by Bill Ashcraft. There he lists all the post-colonial concepts almost in an alphabetical order. And I have taken a few concepts here to show how they can be aligned to the writings of Mahashweta Devi. The first one is that of agency. Agency is the ability to perform an action, to take a decision at an important point of time. So you have those marginalized people, even though they are suppressed and oppressed, at a crucial point of time, they show resilience. Okay, so that is agency. Ambivalence is a concept where you see opposing forces of attraction and repulsion happening between the master and the slave. There are many instances in Mahashweta Devi's writings. Allegory is a common term, but it is also a post-colonial term. And Mahashweta Devi has used symbols in order to bring out the so many factors that fragment post-independent India. And speciesism is one concept. It's also a post-colonial concept where sometimes human beings are treated worse than animals. So there are many instances in her story where the slave is treated very badly, and the cattle that the master owns are given more importance than the slave, the human slave, because the master would have purchased the cattle at better cost, okay, and the slave was much cheaper. So that is a speciesism. So these are some of the concepts, and through this we can understand that aligning the concepts of post-colonialism to the writings of Mahashweta Devi is possible, and it is being done. And Madam Geeta Hariharan has spoken about this aspect as to how Mahashweta Devi is the voice of the subaltern female, and she focused on these two characters, that is Dopti and Jashoda. And you have so many characters, so many women characters. And what is special about Mahashweta Devi is that she has set these women characters in the framework, in the historical, in the political, and social framework, which many writers did not do. Okay, so you have the predicament of these characters, Dowli, who has to choose between being burnt alive or to become a prostitute, and Sanichari, who is gang raped and who does not know what to do with the child in her home, and Josmina, who is pushed to suicide, and Chinta, who is left alone, and Rudalis, those women who don't have anything else to sell except their howls. They are mourners, professional mourners, And Daulati is a symbol of complete exploitation. And Jashoda, as Madam pointed out, she is the legendary cow of fulfillment. And Dopti, who asks the question, can you clothe me again? Okay, so she is a symbol of resistance. So all these women characters share the common thread of otherness. So that is another area of research. And Mahashweta Devi can also be looked upon as the master of subversion. Madam spoke about this also. Subversion is the art of undermining. Students, for your benefit, I am giving you the definition of the word subversion. Subversion is the art of undermining or questioning any authority. It may be the government, it can be any institution. So Mahashweta Devi does that. And for example, I have taken this collection called After Kurukshetra, where we have tales related to Mahabharata. And we can have a contrapuntal reading of the Mahabharata. As Edward Said puts it, when you do contrapuntal readings, that is, counterpoints come out, and which try to bring out the colonial implications in the stories. I will give you one example. The Five Women is a story where you have there is a contrast between the princess. The princess here is Uttara, and she is widowed because her husband died in the war. And then she thinks that she has to lead a life of like endless rituals, and her life has come to an end, and her active life has come to an end. That's what she thinks. Whereas there are five women who are also widowed, and their husbands had been just foot soldiers in the war, and they were all killed. And they don't think that their lives have come to an end. They go on, they lead meaningful lives. So here, Mahashweta Devi, she tries to glorify these common women and not the princess Uttara. In the same way, in Kunti and Nishadin, the focus is on Kunti, who had committed the sin of she has become responsible for the death of six Nishadin characters when she tried to foil the attempt of Duryodhana. Okay, and then Savali is another marginalized character. She a servant who was sent to gratify the sexual needs of Dhritarashtra and later thrown out of the palace. So Mahashweta Devi focuses on these characters. So this is what is called as subversion. We understand that Kurukshetra is not the glorified Dharma Yuddha. Okay, when we read this, we understand that it's not the glorified Dharma Yuddha, but it is a war of mass destruction, which was performed to satisfy the needs of the greed of the kings. So that is Mahashweta Devi, the master of subversion. And this also can be an area of research where people can, students can look at how Mahashweta Devi has used the tribal myth and how she interweaves myth with contemporary stories. So the Birsa Munda and Dani Munda's stories in this Choti Munda and his arrow, how their myths are interwoven in their struggle, in their fight against the British, and how they try to protect the forests against occupation by the British. The pterodactyl and Bhagirath myth, I will deal later on. So then we can also study Mahashweta Devi as an artist. Okay, and here you have a very strange combination. She is an artist on the one hand, and at the same time, she is also a propagandist. She makes a lot of compromises in her art, in her poetics, in her aesthetics, because social reform is at the core of all her writings. And sometimes her writings may read like documentaries, so much of statistics that she gives. Okay, and we don't know whether it is creative writing. No, it is certainly creative writing, because her aim is to bring about a social reform. And you see the voice of protest. Okay, and there are cases where she has supported the cause of the Naxals, and she has brought the other side of the story. So she, and also she has employed the element of shock. Okay, as Madam Geeta Hariharan narrated, that particular scene when Dopti comes out naked in front of Sena Naik, it is not only Sena Naik, but it is also the reader who is shocked. So shock has an element. So these are the use of dry humor. So there are very many avenues to work on Mahashweta Devi's art alone. Okay. Then I wish to focus on this particular area for the rest of my lecture, that is how Mahashweta Devi can be called as the crusader of environmental justice. So let us look at what is environmental justice. Students, you will be all aware of this, I think, eco-criticism as an area of research that is emerging, and how the concept of eco-criticism can be broadened by bringing in environmental justice. So let us just look at what is environmental justice. So here we have a critic called Lawrence Buell, who says that it is community-based resistance. I'll give you a simple example. Students, we have waste dumps, okay, garbage dumps in our cities and towns. The entire waste of the city or the town gets dumped in that particular place. And there are people who are forced to live in those localities, near those localities. And they breathe polluted air and they live in unhygienic conditions. So this is, they have to live there because they don't have any other place to live. So this, it's a gross injustice done to them. And if they raise their voice against that, that can be called as environmental justice. The case becomes even more serious where nuclear dumps and radioactive dumps are located in places where poor people live, black people live, that there is a turn here. The issue takes a racial turn. It becomes environmental racism. This happens in many parts of the world. And in India, it is the divide between the rich and the poor. It is the poor who have to live in such places. Okay, so Mahashweta Devi very beautifully puts it in this story that I have taken. They live there because there is no other way they can live. That is environmental justice. So when it comes to literature, we call that as, when we analyze texts related to environmental justice, then that can be called as environmental justice criticism. So in eco-criticism, we were concerned with the well-being of nature and elements of nature. But in EJ criticism, we include the politically less powerful groups, okay, who are the marginalized communities, black, colored communities, women, etc., into the canon. Okay, so the umbrella becomes broader. So that is EJ criticism. Okay, and T.V. Reid writes the lead essay in this particular book called An Environmental Justice Reader. Okay, so those who want to do research in this particular area can look at this book, Environmental Justice Reader. It's a collection of essays, and there you have a section called Poetics. There T.V. Reid writes the lead essay, and there he says that we have to include, we have to move away from Euro-American male-centered tradition, and you have to include voices from the third world. You have to include voices from the indigenous world. Okay, so it is race conscious or class conscious eco-criticism. So Mahashweta Devi perfectly fits the bill because the writer from the third world, and I have taken two stories, two texts for my analysis. The first one is a long short story, or you can call it as a novella. The title is Pterodactyl, Puran Sahai, and Pitta. It is in this collection called Imaginary Maps. And another is a play titled Water, from the from the collection of plays called Five Plays. And now I just want to show how the concept of environmental justice can be applied to these two texts. And let us understand what is the gross injustice that is that has been given or subjected to, how these two people are subjected to gross injustice. Let us look at the first text, the story called the Pterodactyl. There it is toxicity. And toxicity looms large in the world today, and we cannot deny that. And toxic discourses, they occupy center stage in literary analysis. So Mahashweta Devi actually, in a sweeping stroke, she covers all the contours of environmental justice. Whatever we see in the book, anthologized essays that I talk to you now, that is environmental justice reader, everything has been very effortlessly covered by Mahashweta Devi in this particular story, which runs to just 100 pages. And very casually, she mentions about toxicity. She says that for a long time, people have been dying in Pirta. Pirta is the place located in Madhya Pradesh, and the story happens there. So why are the people dying? The question is that there is an enteric fever. And how did that happen? It happened because water, poison has mixed with water. And as we read, we understand how callous can people be, okay? How nonchalant that people can be. So it is actually a revenge game played upon a very sincere officer called Harisharan. Harisharan actually wanted to help the tribal people, whereas he suspended a few of them who pilfered the pesticide given to the indigenous people, the tribal people. So those people took revenge on Harisharan. How did they take revenge? They just sprayed the pesticide on vacant lands when the land has been harvested. And when it rained, what happened? The pesticide got mixed with the rainwater and it filled all the wells in Pirta, and people continued to drink that water and they died. They ate the kajra tubers which had absorbed the water, and again death and suffering. Okay, so the condition is all the more pitiable because they are not able to understand that the deaths are caused because of this toxic water, and they think that it is beyond their comprehension. They think that it is because of some god's anger or some witch's glance or something like this, and they do not even go to the hospitals. Okay, and if somebody manages to reach the hospital, the doctors are not they don't have the wherewithal to treat them. Okay, so in all discussions related to environmental justice, people say how toxicity can fracture community. But here in Pirta, they don't even understand the dimensions of toxicity. And then how can they make the connection between toxicity and community? So that is the pitiable state of affairs in pterodactyl. Coming to water, the play, here the main focus is starvation. They don't have the tribals, the dome community tribals, they don't have enough to eat. They don't have anything to eat. And there is a dialogue that says that drought and famine has taken the life of thousands. There is a particular reference to the death of Matan's sister and her child who have died out of starvation. And Dura is a character who waits to earn enough so that he can provide 2 times food for his wife, at least 2 times. Okay, so having food 2 times a day itself is a luxury for them. So all this is happening because the government is providing them the relief in the wake of drought or famine, but there are middlemen who take away all that is given. So pilfering is a main focus of Mahashweta Devi, and she makes scathing comments about them. So this is the gross injustice that is the central to any EJ narrative. Then the other important focus is place identities. Okay, these indigenous people, the tribal communities, are rooted to their place. Place is the biophysical anchor of local identities. That is what they call. They cannot be uprooted from their place. Okay, so here in one of the characters, there is a character called Shankar in Pterodactyl. He is the only literate person in that group. And he says that we will not leave this place. Even if you give water, even if you give us food elsewhere, we will not go. We will not go because, see, the graves of our forefathers are in Pirta. Okay, so they are rooted to this particular land and where their forefathers lived, so they will not move from those places. So again, in the play Water, you see how people live their lives by the river Charsa. The name of the river is Charsa and the place is also called Charsa. They don't know the world outside. Okay, and Magai, the protagonist, he's the leader of the Dome community, and he has a beautiful relationship with the river Charsa. Charsa is his wife, and he flirts with her, and he makes fun of her. He gets angry with her, and finally, in the climax, his dead body is taken away by the river Charsa. So what I'm trying to say is, place identities are central to any environmental justice narratives. And it shows how indigenous people are rooted to their places. And we have to contrast this with the modern man's predicament, who just revels in rootlessness. Okay, he doesn't have any root. Okay, so a closely aligned concept is changing geographical landmarks. Okay, changing geographical landmarks, it leads to the degraded lifestyles. So in pterodactyl, there is a beautiful description about how the place Pirta was long back. Okay, so Shankar again narrates how there was a forest, there was a hill, and there was land, and they could cultivate their own land, and peacocks dance. They had water, they had food, they had everything. And then enemies came, and the enemies were fought near the river. Now there is only a bridge there. The map has changed. Okay, so the map has changed. Their lives have also changed. They are no longer landowners. They have become subjects. From subjects, they have become laborers. From laborers to slaves, and then to bonded slaves. So they don't have anything. Their lives are just blown away like dust. That is what he says. Okay, and we have to focus on this particular dialogue that he speaks. We climb hills and build homes. The road comes chasing us. They build roads, schools, houses, hospitals. We want none of this. And anyway, they didn't do it for us. Interestingly, friends, today, this morning, I saw this cutting. I saw this news item in Times, okay, Times of India newspaper. So here also we have a Chipko rerun. Women hug trees to stop felling. So this is happening in Uttarakhand, in one of the villages in Uttarakhand. The reporter has reported it from Dehradun. And here there is a project coming up of having roads. For that, they have to cut 500 trees. And the women of Uttarakhand, they have taken to the established model of Chipko. All of you know that how women hug the trees so that they can stop the felling of the trees. So it's happening even today. And they are saying that we don't want roads. Okay, we don't want roads, and we want only the trees, because already there is starvation here. Already there is no water here. If you cut the trees, we have to suffer, and we depend on the forest for our lives. So this is an interesting story. Students, please look at that. It is in today's times. So here, again, we have, in contrast, similarly in water, in the plain water, also the Charsa River defines the geography of the place. Okay, but what is changing in Charsa is that every year the new wells are dug. Okay, every year there is a new well. But the irony is that new wells are dug, but the indigenous people, the tribal people, they don't have even a single drop of water to drink. So that is how geographical landmarks, when they change, how it degrades the life of people. So this can be seen in any narrative that talks about the lives of indigenous people. One more example is Leslie Thomas. She chronicles the life of Inuit people in her novel called Flight of Geese. There also the same situation, how the lives of Inuits have changed. Okay, so this is, I show you. Now, yes, how indigenous people, the tribal people, have their own ethics. Okay, and actually, we have to understand that injustice is committed to people who do not even understand the magnitude of injustice. They don't even comprehend that something wrong is being done to them. So that kind of innocence that these people possess. Okay, so pterodactyl, she talks, Mahashweta Devi says that there is no word for exploitation or deprivation in the tribal language. And whenever they want to plow the land, either for cultivation or in order to build a home, they ask for the permission of the earth. Okay, they pray to earth, Mother Earth. They ask for the permission of the earth, and they have the habit of worshipping the tree because they think that it is the spirit of the village, and they believe in keeping their ancestors at peace. They want to protect the graves of the ancestors. Okay, and they, at any cost, they want to do that. Even if they want to stay there and die, they don't mind. Okay, so that much of importance they have to their ancestors. Okay, and then they have the habit of building the huts facing east or west so that they think that they can have a look at the enemies who are coming to conquer them. And in the same way, in water also, Mahashweta Devi has this dialogue spoken by the domes and the chandals, they never lie. So here you have the hero, Mahai Dome, who does water divining. He's the diviner. He's a water diviner. And he is the one who finds out where water is underground. And then it is dug by others so that there can be a well. And before he performs this job of water divining, he offers prayers. And he thinks it is a blessing given to him by goddess. And they call the water underground as Nether Ganga. So they they worship the water, and he performs rituals, he fasts, and then he offers prayers, and then he goes on with this job of divining, and then he finds out where water is, and he never charges for this. Okay, he thinks that even his son questions him, why do you do this? Because you do that only for the upper caste people, and they don't give you money, and they don't give us water. And he says that this is a gift given to me, given to my ancestors, and I cannot do that as a business. So that is the ethics of the tribal people and how they retain their ethno-national identity by retaining their ethics. Okay, so this we have to contrast with the predicament or with the lives led by the so-called modern and educated and civilized people like us. Okay, then yes, when we read such tales of environmental justice, the famous line that comes to one's mind is all of us would have read Animal Farm by George Orwell. And there he says the most famous dialogue is that all are equal, but some are more equal than others. So these two narratives or reenactments of that particular line. All are equal, but some are more equal than the others. So the tribal, non-tribal divide is at the center of all the problems, all the conflicts that they face. Okay, in pterodactyl, the aim is to take the lands belonging to the tribal people, just sell it to outsiders in some tribal name, but the tribal will not get any benefit out of it, and then move them out of the place so that there is a man called Kausalji. He's actually the agent or the middleman, and he wants to, his aim is to have tourist spot in Pirta. So because it is a hilly region with a lot of water, so he wants to have tourists coming there. So for that, he has to relocate the tribals who belong to Pirta. So that is his plan. Actually, Mahashweta Devi is taking a dig at the eco-tourism fad that currently is raging. Okay, so we have to remember that it is the right of the indigenous people to live in their places is one of the rights guaranteed by UN's International Bill of Human Rights. So that also comes under the perspective of environmental justice. So the plan of Kausalji to have Pirta tribals in a tribal colony will not work out. Okay, so here in water, what is central is caste discrimination, the upper caste and the lower caste. The upper caste people, the representative is Santosh Pujari, who's the money lender and who's the landowner. And he justifies untouchability by saying that you people eat fowl or pig, and how can, when you touch water, that becomes polluted. Okay, so the irony is that it is only these dome people who divine the water, but they cannot touch the water. So the game of pilfering, that is, relief is given by the government, but it does not reach the requirement of the people. Okay, so here they die out of starvation. They talk about hunger gnawing at one's stomach. That is the only reality. And at the same time, the barns of Santosh Pujari, they are bursting with grains. Okay, so denial is used as a tool for subversion in water. Okay, so this tribal, non-tribal divide is the center for all kinds of injustice that is perpetrated on them. Then Mahashweta Devi does not stop from criticizing the way the system works, bureaucracy and red tape. And all the confusions are confounded because of this system. And she calls this policy framing as a farce. And she says that there is an endless debate going on as to what do we call and what is happening in Pirta. Is it a drought or a famine? Endless debate goes on about that. And she cleverly uses the Union Carbide disaster as an intertext when she says that after the Union Carbide disaster, the chief minister built a luxurious home for himself. Okay, and like she's drawing a parallel between what happened in Bhopal and what is happening in Pirta. Then the irony is that drought inspection committee is sent to Pirta, but they come during the rainy season and they say that, okay, everything is fine in Pirta. Okay, but people continue to die out of starvation. At the same time, you have rice that is rotting in the godowns of Madhpura, the food corporation godowns of Madhpura. There is dry humor in Mahashweta Devi when she talks about what are given to the indigenous people. They are given solar ovens when they don't have anything to cook. They are given biogas when they don't have cattle. And they are given family planning posters when they don't believe in family planning. For them, more hands to work is priority. Okay, so she very humorously points out how they use the family planning posters. They use the indigenous people, the tribal people use the posters to hide the cracks on the walls, or they spread it on the ground to protect them from cold. Okay, so these are the things that are given to them and they don't want that. And actually on the other side, the people outside, they accuse the indigenous people by saying that whatever is given to them is being sold in the open market. Okay, so then in water also, Mahashweta Devi makes a pungent remark about how bureaucracy and red tape functions. Okay, so the outsider, the BDO and the SDO, the block development officer, they have big discussions. Okay, they say that why there is always problem in Chassa, drought followed by drought, flood followed by flood, flood followed by drought, and drought followed by flood. They say that the place is chronic, it is like incurable dysentery. Okay, so but they are ready to give relief to the people of Chassa, but they see to it that it does not reach them. So the relief is given to the wrong person, because Santosh is the only upper caste person, he's the only educated person there, so he is the chosen one. Okay, so they know very well that it does not reach them, the relief does not reach them. But there is a big debate again as under whose whose priority it is, whether it is the SDO who has to take care of that, or whether it is the BDO who has to take care of that. Okay, they know that there is untouchability practiced in Chassa, but they say on paper there is no untouchability, so there is no untouchability in Chassa. Okay, and there is money lending going on, again there is no case filed against that, so nothing can be done. Okay, so this is what is happening in places. And in one of the books called Environmental Justice and Communities of Color, Robert D. Bullard points out how the goal of environmental justice framework is to make environmental protection democratic. It should reach everybody. Okay, and the question of the ethical and political questions of who gets what, why, and to what amount, and who benefits from, or who has to suffer the consequences of technological expansion, they all come to the fore when you analyze such issues. And Mahashweta Devi very critically says that in India, even a famine or a drought is sold or bought to whomsoever it may concern. Okay, then now from the side of the people, what do they do? Okay, in environmental justice, as I told you, it is community-based resistance. And normally there is slogan shouting, normally there is fist raising, but in pterodactyl and water, these people are so innocent that they cannot have any community-based fights, okay, community-based struggles. Okay, so in pterodactyl, by denying everything that is given to them and by refusing to move out of the place, they achieve victory. And the people, they are fully in exile and they don't receive anything from modern India. And I just want to draw your attention to the Sardar Sarovar project. And during the course of when the dams were constructed, so many thousands of tribals had to move out of their lands, of their native lands. So there they made a compromise. They came out, and Arundhati Roy says that they started rolling like stones and there was no stopping them. So that was their fate. But here in Pirta, in Mahashweta Devi's Pirta, they refuse to move. Okay, they say you may die, but you don't have to change. That is the resolution that they take. So Shankar says that we don't go anywhere. Let them give us our dues here. Here, if not, let them forget us. At most, we will die. Nothing worse can happen. So this is the resistance. Okay, by denying, they have achieved justice. And it is not activism here, but it is just a question of survival. Whereas in this play called Water, the tribal people, they arrive at a solution to solve their water problems. What is that? Is to build a simple dam that is a 7 feet dam. Okay, just 7 feet. And they're not going to use concrete or cement to build the land. What they're going to do is just use the boulders that are available on the banks of the river Chassa. And the silt that is brought by the river will fill the gaps and it will stay there. So during the floods, the water will come and it will be saved there. And during the summer months, they can use it. Okay, so they dream of self-sufficiency, subsistence. Okay, we all know about subsistence perspective. Okay, trying to use the local resources so that we can solve our problems. So that is what they aim at. Okay, they dream of building the dam. They dream of attaining self-sufficiency. Then what happens in their attempts? In Pterodactyl, when the story comes to an end, it is the same situation, life and death. People are dying, they are sick, they are dying, their numbers are decreasing, but still they are living there. Okay. Whereas in Water, there is violence. Okay. The Santosh Pujari calls the police, and you see that violence is unleashed on these Dome community, and Magai Dome is killed and 17 others are injured and the dam is broken. Okay, so they aimed at achieving subsistence, but even that is thwarted. Okay, so we understand how it's very easy to talk about resistance, talk about struggle, and these powerless people are fighting against the powerful groups, okay, the government and the bureaucrats and sometimes the corporate companies. So that divide is very clearly seen in the endings of the stories. Now, yes, Mahashweta Devi very cleverly, she combines myths in these stories. Okay, as I already told you, she revisits the myths. And here you have the myth of the pterodactyl. Pterodactyl, she acknowledges in the end of the story that the pterodactyl is actually a part of the imagination, her own imagination, and it doesn't belong to the tribal myth, but she is using it in a very clever manner. And she says that pterodactyl is, all of you will know that it is a reptile come bird. And here it's an extinct creature, but it comes back to life here in the story. And it flies around, and the people who are able to see the shadow, they don't see the bird as such, but only the shadow. They think that wherever the bird flies, those lands belong to them. And they believe that it is the ancestor's soul that is visiting them. So here, through this myth, Mahashweta Devi is able to connect the myth to the modern times. Okay, what is happening here? Here you have a young boy called Vikia. He is the one who nurses the injured pterodactyl. And when the author is making comparisons, okay, on the one hand, you have the pterodactyl and the people, the indigenous people, that is the tribal community on the one hand, and the modern man on the other. Okay, so the pterodactyl is endangered, the tribal community is endangered. And there are insurmountable communication barriers between the modern man and the tribal and the pterodactyl. Okay, and more than that, the pterodactyl seems to be sending a prophetic message that I have gone extinct, and in due course you will also go extinct. It tells the modern man. Okay, so war and nuclear explosions, all this we see them happening. So it is a message of extinction, that a warning message that is sent across by the pterodactyl. So that is the myth in this story. In the play Water, Mahashweta Devi uses the myth of Bhagirath. We all know the story of Bhagirath. It is a sub-story in Mahabharata, and how he made great efforts to bring river Ganges from heavens to the earth. Okay, so when river Ganges, when Ganga came down to earth, Mother Earth, her name is, she's called Basmati. She asks Ganga to give some water to her so that she can keep it in the bowels of the earth. She can keep it underground. So that is how Nether Ganga came into existence. So the underground water stays inside. And when a water diviner like Magai Dome, when he performs puja, when he asks that there is a need, then the underground water comes out. Okay, so the goddess and the Dome community people think that the goddess, that is the Nether Ganga, is their goddess. Basmati is their goddess. So they offer pujas, and then the water comes up. Then here, in modern context, Magai, who's the water diviner, he brings the water from underneath to the surface. So he becomes the Bhagirath. And in another context, Jitan, the educated school teacher, who gives them the idea of constructing the dam, he also becomes the Bhagirath. Okay, so we can very clearly see how mythology is interwoven into the tales to make it relevant to the modern situations. And yes, as I already told you, Mahashweta Devi's narratives are layered. Okay, you have so many meanings, and it is for the reader to explore all these and to bring out all these. So there is a dystopian vision that emerges at the end of the story, Pterodactyl. Everything seems to be poisonous, the vegetables, the fruits, and it's a scary vision. Okay, she talks about DDT, deadly DDT, greens, channel house vegetables, okay, radioactive potatoes. So bloodthirsty octopus creepers, animal blood-filled tomatoes. So this passage gives a very scary picture, because we are surrounded by toxicity. Okay, we know, like we see how much chemicals are sprayed on the vegetables that we eat. Okay, so this is a very scary picture, and she goes on to tell that this is not happening just in Pirta. Pirta is a microcosm of India. Okay, so India is the microcosm, and so that is the dystopian vision that emerges in Pterodactyl. We should think about that as well. Whereas in Water, there is the eco-feminist undercurrent. Okay, the women, even though the Dome communities are the marginalized lot, the women of the Dome communities are doubly marginalized, because they are the ones who have to go during the summer months, and they dig at the sands of the river Chassa. Repeatedly, they mention how their hands have gone sore, how there are boils in their hands, and how they cry in order to do this job of digging, so that they get at least a few drops of water. So you see how the women or the suffering ones among the major suffering community of the domes. Okay, so there is no water because of environmental exploitation, and the women suffer because of women being exploited by the man in the household. So that is the eco-feminist undercurrent. And on the other hand, as I told you, River Chassa is also looked upon as a woman, and Magai Dome looks at Chassa as his wife. Okay, so there is a relationship between Pulmani, that is his real wife, and River Chassa, yes, which is called as the co-wife. Okay, so the weeping Nether Ganga, at one point of time, Nether Ganga, the underground water, seems to be weeping, because it looks at a lot of these suffering communities. Okay, and if you look at the beginnings, there are some the beginnings of these stories are a little uncharacteristic because Mahashweta Devi takes a little time to plunge into the main story. Okay, in Pterodactyl, we have the mention about the hero or one among the protagonists. His name is Puran Sahai, and his name is Prarthana Puran. Just as Madam spoke about Podum Pen, here you have a man who's called Prarthana Puran because his mother had been delivering only girls, and grandfather asks for a male child, and then this boy was born, so he is given the name Prarthana Puran. Then when he becomes a young man, he thinks that he has to cut one part of his name. So whether to cut Prarthana or Puran. So his wife is Archana, so he cuts Prarthana and he becomes Puran. So all these details are there, and we wonder whether it is Mahashweta Devi's story, because the initial few pages are like that, and his wife dies, and so all those things are there. Then later, when the story shifts to Pirta, we understand, okay, this is a typical Mahashweta Devi tale. Then here in water also, the story begins with talking about the nexus between the tribal community and the Naxals. Okay, so it is very easily possible for the tribals being branded as Naxals. Okay, that is what she is hinting at. So subversion is at play here also. Okay, there are many character parallels running in both the narratives. Kaushalji and Santosh are the agents, and BDO and the SDO, they represent the bureaucracy, and Puran Sahai and Harisharan and Jitan are the ones you say that somebody has to throw a rock at the sun. Okay, the sun is the established government, the bureaucracy, or the private players, whomever they are powerful. Okay, so throwing a rock at the sun, somebody has to make an attempt and somebody has to aim at it. Okay, so these are the characters who try to do some good for the tribals. And Shankar and Dura represent the little illiterate ones who are a little bit brave and courageous. Okay, and now the most important part of this is that we have to understand that these tales are not imaginary, and they are happening. They continue to happen in different parts of the world, especially in places in our own country. There are instances of toxicity. All of us remember the Bhopal gas tragedy, and as Mahashweta Devi herself has mentioned it in the book, in this story, Pterodactyl. And so it happened in 1983, and people are still suffering the consequences of a Union Carbide disaster. So that is one. And the endosulfan disaster that happened in Kasaragod district of Kerala. So you have many books, N. Mahaji, translated as Swarga in English, recently translated. So these are all real happenings. They are not imaginary at all. They are happening. It continues to happen in different parts of the world. Okay, so we have instances of struggle as we saw today. Somewhere something goes on happening. Okay, so and again relocation wars, how the tribals have been pushed from one place to another. Sardar Sarovar is a big example. Then later on, when the Statue of Unity was built, again in the same Sardar Sarovar site, again many thousands of people were relocated. So relocation is another major problem. And Madhya Pradesh, the story does not confine itself to Madhya Pradesh. It is India. And Nagesha, the tribals in Pirta, they represent the entire tribal community. This Mahashweta Devi herself says in the ending note of the story. In water, I told you that they build a dam. Is it possible for common people to build a dam? Yes, it is possible. They have done it in a place called Khanapur in Maharashtra on the Krishna River, and it is called as the Bali Raja Dam. It is a success story, unlike what is happening in the play water. Here, they built the dam, of course, after getting the permission, but these people do not get the permission because they don't know that they have to get permission. Okay, so it was partly funded by the local people, and it was fully built by the local people. So they were able to share water, they were able to share the land, and women were given equal or active share of land and water. Okay, so this environmental and social justice is achieved in Bali Raja Dam. It is a success story, but sadly, this did not happen in Chassa. yes, as a conclusion, I would like to say, like, how do we measure the greatness of a literary text? Okay, the greatness of the literary text need not be measured by its abstraction alone. Okay, when a text focuses on the suffering human community, on the debilitating natural community, and when the text has the capability to move scholarship to do some real work so that it promotes the social justice and the environmental justice, that work can be called as great work. Okay, that can be called as typical great work. And Mahashweta Devi has won these awards. And in my opinion, she deserves more, maybe a Nobel. Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity. I thank the Department of English for having thought about me for this seminar. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. A special thanks to you for enlightening us on the works of Mahashweta Devi. And we will move on to the Q&A session.
Yes.
Considering Mahashweta Devi's Draupadi and Gayatri Spivak, the theory of subalternity and the voice of subalterns, how do you equate or contradict both these writers and their ideologies of casteist discrepancies?
Equate Mahashweta Devi as well as
Gayatri Spivak, Chakravarti Spivak.
Yes, Gayatri Spivak has made many translations of Mahashweta Devi. And yes, can the subaltern speak? The answer is yes. And maybe they don't have anybody to listen. That's how Spivak concludes the essay. Okay, so Mahashweta Devi shows that they have the agency, they have the power, and they can speak. And Draupadi is a very typical example where she asserts, okay, through her nudity, she asserts that she can rebel, that she can show her resistance. Okay, so what is put forth as a theory by Spivak is translated into an experience by Mahashweta in the story Draupadi. I think I have answered the question.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. And one more question, ma'am. Can we fit her works, certain literary works, under the gamut of cli-fi, that is climate fiction?
Yes, you're talking about Mahashweta. Yes. Certainly, yes, cli-fi is an emerging area. Yeah, it's just a question of interpretation, how we interpret. Now I interpreted these two texts from the environmental justice perspective. And they can also be, yes, they can also be looked upon from the climate change perspective. Yes, this question of drought and famine and whether they are man-made. That is what cli-fi also tells you. Okay, that is what Anthropocene fiction. That's what we call them. So there also we come to the conclusion that all these are man-made, whether it is drought or whether it is famine, it is man-made. So in that way, yes, we can.
Thank you, ma'am. And one more question. Could you please, from your experience as a teacher of literature, hand out a teaching methodology for eco-feminist novels, especially in the UG class?
Yeah.
How to go about teaching of the eco-feminist novels for the UG class?
Yes. We make the students understand real life experiences. Okay, before going to the imaginary text, we present realities to them. Since you're talking about ecofeminism, I'm telling, yes, when I taught ecofeminism to my students, I gathered information, statistics about how it is the women there is an unwritten law that it is the women who have to fetch water for the family, and how many miles they walk, And there are stories that have happened in Thane in Maharashtra a few years back. It was in the newspapers how a woman had to walk so many miles and she had to make so many trips in order to bring water for that particular day's work, that is cooking and drinking. And after the fourth trip, she died out of exhaustion. Okay, so this is a simple example of ecofeminism. She is not in any way responsible for the lack of water in her place. Okay, it is human beings who have exploited the environment, and as a result, there is no drinking water. But she is the one who's chosen by the family to go out and fetch water. So nature is exploited on the one hand, and the woman is exploited on the other. And it parallelly happens, and this is ecofeminism. When we tell this to the students, obviously, I think they will understand. So go from reality to imaginary text. And there are very many examples. I think this will be a suitable method. Hope you agree with me, sir.
Thank you, ma'am, for the power-packed lecture on the protesting voice of Mahashweta Devi as an environmental crusader. Thank you once again for impressing upon us that to lead a peaceful life on this earth, it is important to treat the women and nature with dignity.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Saying thank you is more than good manners. It is good spirituality. I request Dr. Suresh Frederick, Dean of Research and UG Head, Department of English, to propose the vote of thanks.
Respected head of the department, revered chief guests, speakers, learned colleagues, and my dear participants. Good afternoon, everyone. I've been assigned the pleasant task of proposing the vote of thanks. First of all, I wish to thank our principal in absentia. He is the backbone of all the programs in the college, and this program was also promoted by him. In absentia, I wholeheartedly thank him. At this juncture, I just want to thank our speakers. First of all, I wish to thank the main speaker, where she was talking about when women narrate the nation. So when this is a very thought-provoking talk, ma'am. I wholeheartedly thank you for your talk, Dr. Gita Harigaraman. Thank you very much. When she was speaking, I was provoked to think about my own writer, J.M. Singh. That's an Irish writer. He speaks about a couple of characters like Nazi and Deirdre. Deirdre of Sorrow is one of the famous plays where the writer is able to invert the myth. And also the Nora kind of character, like that, how people walk out of the family. So that kind of thing is happening. But how our own people narrate the nation, women narrate, it's very thought-provoking. Thank you very much, ma'am. I also wish to thank the other speaker, Dr. Sumati, ma'am. A really very useful talk from another perspective, environmental perspective. Thank you very much. At this juncture, I also wish to thank our head of the department, Dr. Shobana, because this seminar itself is the brainchild of Dr. Shobana. We should give a great hand for her. So nobody knows this because she started working on this from the beginning. And I also wish to thank Dr. Parvati for helping see the light. And also, I wish to thank all the people who worked for this particular moment. Especially, I wish to thank our Dr. C.D. sir for this, and also Dr. Shanti ma'am And also we have Dr. P. Suresh Kumar, Dr. Ronald David, and list is endless. And of course, we have one more vote of thanks. I think the other person will fill in the blanks and finish. So with this, these names which come to my mind, I also wish to thank the IT support people, and also we have the photographers here. And when I look back, I look around and see this beautiful backdrop, I come to know that this is designed by, any guess? Mr. Sam, Jabba Sam has done this. That's what I hear from Dr. Susie Giran. Also the logo, I'm really happy about that, done very well. So from the bottom of my heart, I thank all of you for the support. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Dear participants, it's time for a break now. Let's resume sharp at 1:30 p.m. again for the technical sessions. Kindly be present at the respective venues. Do join us for the valediction at 3:30 p.m. I repeat, the valediction will take place sharp at 3:30 p.m. In case of any discrepancies, kindly contact the query team. Thank you once again.